And you asked me about the boys in blue, and I have some really close friends from my union relationships, but they go beyond that. Helping some of my buddies who are on, long-term friends from the police department whose kids see the light and want to be firefighters.
Oh, that's funny.
I've helped some of their sons get hired, and if they're good guys, there's some guys that never help, but it's always been a fun rivalry, and I have a couple really good friends on the police department that we came in together, and we're gonna be retiring around the same time, and I look forward to spending more time with them and doing things off duty and putting this whole thing behind us.
All right, can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Jim Walker. I'm a Boise Fire captain, 26 years.
26 years with the fire department here in Boise. Can you tell me, Jim, give me a little idea of growing up and what ultimately led you to become a fireman?
Okay, yeah. I always tell people that growing up, I wanted to be a trash man because those guys got to ride the tailboard. Like how cool. You get it right on the back, jump off, throw trash. The fire guys in my town in Nampa, they rode inside. So I said the tailboard, that's the cool thing. Back in the day before, all the safety Nazis got involved, you could ride on the tailboard, and it was a cool part of the fire job. Now you can't do that. So, but went to school in Nampa, moved to Meridian for junior high, and I think one key thing is that I've always been involved in sports. So I always wanted to be in sports, playing team sports and individual sports. So I wrestled, played baseball, basketball, track, but I couldn't get into football until junior high because I was too big. So back then, Optimus football, if you weighed over 150 pounds, you couldn't play.
You were too big.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my parents, they put me in soccer. It was co-ed soccer even, so it was humiliating. I wasn't that great at soccer. But seventh grade, got into football, and I realized, God, I needed this my whole life. I was kind of a chubby kid, and sometimes picked on. To go out and smash people, and do it legally was amazing. It changed my whole personality. I was this kid who had all these things pent up. I could go to football, and all that unleashed on other people, and I loved it. I loved playing sports. And so I think team sports, working with a team towards a common goal, it lended itself to this profession I'm in. I didn't know at the time that the fire service relied on working in a team. It wasn't on my radar at all. But team sports. I also, serving the community, serving the country was important to me. And as I moved along in high school, I started running for office. I was student body president. I went to Boise State. I thought the service academies would be perfect for me. I had these two tracks. I was focusing on football and getting a scholarship, but at the same time going down the path to get into the service academies because I wanted to fly. But I was a big guy, and I kept getting bigger. And I received the nomination from Senator McClure for the Air Force Academy, or the Naval Academy, and Congressman Craig at the time for the Air Force Academy. And I thought I was going, but I went and did my physical. And back then, for my height, to get into the academy, you had to have a certain weight. So I was 6'1 3/4", and I had to be like 225 or less. When I went in for my physical, I was about 265. They said, you can get a waiver from the football team if that, otherwise you're going to have to drop that 35 pounds and hit it before you get your full appointment. And I sent my tapes off, my football tapes, to the coach at Air Force, which I had drilled into. That's where I want to go. The coach came back and said, you're going to have to get in the traditional way. What the fuck you, man? I've got all these coaches knocking on my door. They want me to come play for them. And you don't think I'm good enough to play Air Force Academy? Fuck you. So I think that was a big turning point in my life, because I could have easily gone into Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, and been in a military career.
So Air Force and Naval Academy, you're getting appointments. That means you're not a dumb jock. I mean, you're clearly at least getting decent grades, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had the minimum ACT score. I always told my kids that I was a 3.7, 3.8 student, and then they found my report cards. Yeah, my parents moved out of their house. I mean, I wasn't bad, but I wasn't a 4.0 student. So.
Yeah, but you weren't a 2.0 student. I mean, clearly you had to have the grades plus the athletic ability to get even the appointment for the military academies.
Yeah. Right. And then, like I said, I focused on those leadership positions. I was a class president, student body president, doing all these ancillary things and working. I look at kids' schedules today. I had these athletic teams I was on, these groups I was involved in, plus working any hour that I could, because we weren't rich. So I had to fund all my own fun. So, I was from 5 a.m. till 10 p.m. every day for most of my high school career.
Really?
Scheduled out.
Wow. What did you do? What some of the part-time jobs you had?
Well, in the summers I worked in farms, bucking bells, which was always bucking bells and just I worked for a farmer locally. If you know where the Amazon warehouse is.
Yeah.
That used to be the farm fields I worked.
Yeah.
And hunted pheasant and did all that. So Meridian was 10,000 people when we lived out there. And there was not a stoplight between like Meridian Road and Maple Grove. So you could drive down Fairview at 75 miles an hour.
Yeah, yeah. So what about your parents? Were they big into education? Do they expect you to go to college?
Yeah. So 6th generation Idahoan, ranching on both sides. The Glens Ferry area, the King Hill area. We had 2 family ranches down there. The ranches got sold out of the family the generation before me, and the push, at least for my grandfather, for my dad and his brothers, was to go to college. My mom's side, so they both were first generation college educated in their families. Mm. And that was a push. They wanted us to go into engineering, and every engineer I met growing up was a nerd, so it didn't really appeal to me. I didn't know that there was options within the engineering field that probably would have been great for what I enjoy work-wise. Mm-hmm. But my older brother he's an engineer, big successful firm in Houston. My sister, she's a lawyer, teaches at the law school. My little brother, who's on the fire department, he got his degree in math physics, was going to go off to get his master's in engineering. And fortunately, he got sidelined, got the wildland bug, and then moved into firefighting. I had a scholarship to play football at Boise State and got my degree in business.
So is that what happened? The Air Force guy goes, you're going to have to get in here the traditional way, and you went, screw you, and then you end up going to Boise?
Yeah, it was right at the time, Skip Hall, my football coach, was in the living room with my parents and me, and there was other coaches who'd come to our family home and offered scholarships, and Boise State was a program on the rise. be fun to play locally in front of my friends and family, and so I chose to take that over some other schools and played at Boise State for 5 years.
What position?
Center and guard.
Center. So you have a successful career in your mind then?
I mean, it wasn't amazing. I wasn't not NFL bound by any means.
Did you have fun though?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I've got lifelong friends from that experience. And,
Yeah.
Football, it stopped becoming fun, became more of a business probably about second, third year into it, where you got a full class load. Back then we had no NIL, or, the scholarship checks barely covered your rent. And I was always desperate for money. So it just became this balancing act of going to school, going to class, going to football, and then NCAA rules wouldn't allow you to have a job. So struggling to
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know you couldn't have a job when you were in college?
Not except for breaks.
Huh.
So I'd have to make my full fund money account during the summer.
Do you know why that was?
Well, yeah, back then it was more, NCAA was concerned that you could have a job and not show up to it during the school year. It was a place where they thought that bigger programs or programs that weren't honest would just put these kids on the payroll and not get anything out of it in return. So, yeah.
All right. Okay, so you go to college, you graduate. What was your degree in that you graduated with?
Finance.
Finance. Okay, what did you want to do?
I wanted to work on Wall Street. So that's one of the things about being, we're state far removed from like Wall Street, and not having parents who knew the business world and what it takes. They had no idea that if you're going to work on Wall Street, you really need to be in an Ivy League school. Everybody works there comes from an Ivy League school in the big positions back in New York, and it's full of Ivy Leaguers and East Coast type of schools. Wall Street didn't come knocking. They weren't recruiting on Boise State campus. It was local banks and financial planning firms. I took a position with First Interstate, which was a regional bank at the time, in their management training program. And I knew right after a couple of weeks it wasn't for me. They were going to train me up, send me to some podunk bank to be a branch manager, and then you kind of do that, move around until you could move up into the real money positions. It didn't interest me at all. So I had applied also right as I was leaving school for some internships in athletic administration. Being an athletic director appealed to me to some degree. I'm like, I could best of both worlds, business and sports that I love. So I got a call from, it was back then, you could fax your resume or send it. Cell phones weren't a thing. And this guy finally got in touch with me from Tulane University in New Orleans. And he offered me a paid internship position in the athletic business office. I'd never lived outside of Idaho. I thought this would be a great chance. Pre-Katrina New Orleans was a wild, wild place. So here I am, this white kid who's only ever lived in Idaho, and I quit my job with First Security and moved down to New Orleans. And it was an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, how was that? I mean, you go from Idaho to where were you? It was at New Orleans then?
Mm-hmm.
New Orleans. So not like outskirts. You were in there.
Tulane's right in the heart of New Orleans.
Okay.
Right in the Garden District.
Mm-hmm.
The year I lived there, it was the murder capital of the U.S. per cap.
Wow.
I had this job. So I was the athletic business intern, which pretty much meant I was the bitch for the athletic department. I had to do every shit job there was. Back then, they did tape delayed basketball games for ESPN. So they'd tape the first half, upload it to a satellite, and then it'd be a tape delayed broadcast. The athletic director would give me his big old Cadillac sedan. I'd have to drive it through the Ninth Ward, which the Ninth Ward was a war zone, to the satellite uplink station, and they would upload it. As I'm driving through the Ninth Ward, I mean, it was routine for me to see like a car just burning and no fire engines around. and they tell me like that Cadillac's, it's a car that's not going to be out of place in the Ninth Ward, so don't spend any time, don't make any stops. You drive there and come straight back. You get to the satellite uplink station. It's barbed wire fence with razor wire on top, and they had this slot. I'd slide the tape through, and they're like, "Get out of here." Like, okay.
What year was that?
93, 94.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was finished, though, one of the things I found is that in athletics, I liked athletics. I didn't like being an athletic supporter. So everything they do is to further the lives of these 18, 19-year-old prima donnas, and it didn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm no longer that prima donna. I'm helping these kids, and they have no appreciation for what you do or what it takes to put on to keep an athletic department running, to make sure everything's flawless. And when they don't get their way, they act like petulant children. And this doesn't interest me either. So
yeah,
my parents had moved to Delaware. My dad had been transferred, and it was the first time they lived outside of Idaho too. They said, "You can come here and work and figure out your life." So I moved out there with them, and I got into sales, and eventually I got into rugby. One of my buddies on the rugby team out there started this microbrewery, and I went to work for him. They went bankrupt. So as much as I resisted it, I went back into banking and started moving up the ladder at this place. MBNA was a big credit card bank.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting to the point where I knew I was getting trapped by salary going up.
Right.
I got married and met Monica, and she was an East Coast girl. She said, I told her, I'm like, I have no intention of staying back here. Like the East Coast, I was claustrophobic. Every inch of land out there is privately owned. Like you can't just pull over and hike in the foothills like we can do up here.
Mm-hmm.
I just, those big, beautiful hardwood forests, I mean, they're so thick, and you never get to a point where you can get some perspective on the land. And I don't know, this claustrophobia is the best way I can describe how I felt back there. So I came out for Thanksgiving without her, and I went out the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, ran into a bunch of friends, ran into this girl I'd gone to school with, and she was the head of HR for Micron Technology, or Micron Electronics, which they built. They were competitors with Dell back then. They built laptops and computers, and was going to work in government sales. Anyways, I got the job. We had to be out here on January 1, and Monica decided that we weren't going to tell her parents about it until after Christmas. It's like, I don't want to ruin their Christmas.
We're going to tell them that you guys were moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once I convinced her that we're moving, she resisted, but she also wanted a break from the East Coast. She wasn't happy with Idaho. She thought we were going to do California or Colorado or something,
mm-hmm.
but she followed me anyways. And so we wait the day after Christmas. We tell her parents. Her dad starts puking. Her mom starts belittling everything about that decision, including telling me like, Micron Electronics is not a strong company. They're going to be out of business in a year. Fuck you, bitch.
So, okay, wait a minute. Is it fair to say that They didn't like you at the time?
Yeah, they were not. I mean, I knocked up their daughter, first of all.
Okay.
We had a little bit of a shotgun wedding.
Okay.
And then, so I got her pregnant. We had a kid. And then now I'm taking her away from them. They were not. And they put it all on me.
But they kind of, either mom or dad kind of thought you as the country bumpkin, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. My mother-in-law, she was a executive for Hercules Chemical Corporation. And my father-in-law was professor of speech pathology at Temple University.
Mm.
And they're both, so they're Cuban exiles. So they came after Castro took over. They moved to Miami and then eventually found their way up to Pennsylvania. But in Cuba, their families were high-end, high society there. So they carried some of that background with them, and they had a desire for their daughter to marry a doctor or a lawyer.
Sure.
Not a bumpkin from Idaho.
Okay. So you moved to Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
What happens?
Yeah, we got here in January. I show up for work.
Yep.
And it's great. They'd just hired a new CFO. It's about the same time. And on Friday of the first week, they called me into the office and like, we need you to collect your things. The CFO, new CFO, just did a big layoff. It's 10% of the workforce, including all new hires. Fuck, I gotta go home and tell my wife about this. And so I didn't even know what to say. I got home and she's in a panic. She goes, "We're not telling my parents." I'm like, hell no. I'm never going to give that woman the right to say, "I told you so." Yeah. But the fortunate thing is they gave me severance. They'd given me a stipend to move out here and paid for the move. So I had about 6 months of runway and decided I was going to take my time and figure out what I wanted to do. My younger brother had joined the fire department about 4 years prior. And, I told him he was an idiot when he did it. I'm like, what are you going to do? Play checkers all day? What do you guys even do? I used to like to haze him at family events about his decision to become a firefighter. Because at that time, our family was, my older brother's an engineer, my sister's an attorney. Like, they have life figured out. They're in these great professions, and you're going to be a firefighter? Come on. That's blue collar. It's below us. But I was doing his taxes that year. I was started making extra money where I could on the side and did his taxes. I'm like, he did okay, money wise. And that previous fall, he'd arranged his scheduled trades and vacations and had 40 hunting days in a row. I mean, I'd never heard of that. Like, how can you have 40 days off at work? And he didn't shoot an animal. So 40 days and nothing to show for it. I was pretty sure that I could have 40 days and I'd have a few animals shot. But not him. But he and I are the tightest in our family. Mm-hmm. And just the way he expressed his passion for the job, I started thinking about it. And right at that time, probably about a month after the layoff, they were testing. I just hit the application under the wire, the deadline to get in, and did well on the written. The physical back then was geared up towards my type of physique, a lot of strength. I was fresh off of rugby, so I was in great cardio shape. And the physical test at the time was a big eliminator. It failed 30 to 35% of the folks. Mm. So I made it. I did it well on the written, got through the physical and then the interview. During that process, I had taken a job with First Security, my bank that I left before. And then it just became a matter of clock watching. And I thought I was going to, they told me I should expect to be hired within the next month or two after they set the list. At the time, the city leadership and the fire department were on the same page. The airport director he kept bumping heads with the police and the firefighters there. He wanted his own little kingdom, and he didn't want to have anybody who could prevent him from doing what he wanted. So one of his first actions, eventually kicked the police out. He went to a private force for a while, but he did right away kick we lost our airport firefighting contract. They kicked all of us off the airport, and so now there's all these positions that had to be absorbed. So I didn't get hired when I expected. I got hired like a year and a half after they told me I would.
But let me ask you this, Jim. What, besides the 40 days off, straight hunting, making pretty good money, was there anything else in there that you thought, hey, this firefighting gig might turn out to be an okay gig?
Yeah, I mean, it appealed to my my desire to serve my community. I love Idaho. I love Boise, and I'll always live here. The ability to serve that, but also my brother. Everything he did was with his coworkers. Everything off duty, everything socially, and they clicked so well and got along so well, and it was something I hadn't experienced in work. It was something I'd only experienced in sports, and was able to observe that, hey, these guys work as a team. They live together. They bond in a way that no other profession can do, except probably the military or even law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
You come to depend on these people that you're working with for your life, and and they depend on you for their life. And it's a dynamic that I hadn't thought about, but there's a lot of crossover between it and team sports that appealed to me. And once I started hanging around my little brother and his friends, and there was no doubt that's what I wanted to do.
Mm. When you start, is there expectation in your mind about what you think you're going to be doing versus what ends up actually happening?
Oh yeah. I mean, you think it's going to be action, heart pounding action every day. You're there, and because the fire service has evolved, and as I came in, there was still a decent amount of structure fires. We've done a great job of our fire prevention division of improving code so that fires don't spread as much. We don't have as many smokers in society anymore that cause a lot of fires. But building code is probably the most important thing that has made fires occur on a less regular basis. Our fires are hotter and bigger now because of the things that we put into our houses and the building materials we use, but they don't occur as regular as they did even when I came into the job. But the other thing that's occurred too is the way they're engineering vehicles. So extrication used to be a big part of the job, where these vehicles, when they crash, they crumple and they entrap the folks that are in the car. Now they're designed so that the vehicles absorb and protect the people so well. The energy is dissipated. I'll pull up on a vehicle crash now and think that there's going to be 3 fatalities, and there's 3 people walking around with little scratches and bumps. But
when you started, with that being said, when you started, do you feel like you've pulled out a lot more, or you don't have to use the jaws of life as much as you used to?
Not at all. Yeah, I mean, a rollover crash where cars on its top and the doors are compromised, and a person could be okay but entrapped in that vehicle. That doesn't happen anymore. They just protect that passenger compartment so well, and then make it so that there's easier ways of egress. We used to have to pop doors, lift dashes, free people, and doesn't happen as often as it used to.
Mm. Okay, so you started in '99. What's the first station house? I was going to say precinct. What do you guys call it? Where are you stationed first?
So in Boise, if you're a firefighter, you're like, oh, I'm at 3s.
Okay.
Or right now I'm at 17s. You just say the number.
Okay.
So I started at 3s.
But is that what do you got? Is it a house or?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But you guys just call it a number.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean station 3, but shorthand is 3s.
Okay. So you start at 3s. I'm assuming it's just there's no specialties at this point. You're just a guy. What do they call their unit? I know there's like battalions and all sorts of stuff, but if you're at a house, is it just a group? I mean, what do they call it?
We're a single company.
Single company.
House. Engine,
Okay.
Engine 3 runs out of station 3.
Okay.
There's a few stations where there's an engine and a truck.
Okay.
Or an engine and a ladder. And those are multi-company houses. And then most of those stations that are multi-company also have a battalion chief.
Okay.
There's 3 battalions in Boise, 3 battalion chiefs. So kind of segregate try and keep it within the span of control so that each battalion chief has no more than 7. Right now we've gone over that. So each battalion chief probably has 8 to 9 companies underneath them. But we say the perfect span of control is like 5 to 7.
Okay. Give me an idea when you started in '99, what type of calls you were answering then compared to what do you do now? Has it changed that much, or are you still kind of doing the same thing you were doing back in '99?
Let's say that doing less fires now. More fires. We had fewer stations, fewer responders back then, so fires could get bigger. There were, cell phones that was the advent of people. Not everybody in society had cell phones, so fires would start and get big before someone would call. Like Grandma Jones down the street sees a flame. She's out walking her dog. She has to walk back to her house and go to the landline to call 911.
Mm-hmm.
Versus now, people see a little waft of smoke and they're calling us. So fires don't have as much time to grow as they did when I started.
Okay, so when you started way back when the fires were a little bit bigger, did you ever have to answer calls like in the movie Backdraft, where you have these massive buildings on fire, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have been on some really large commercial fires that were. Now the difference between us and Backdraft is we wouldn't go into some of those. I think in Backdraft they went into an abandoned warehouse that was on fire. We wouldn't take that risk.
Yeah, and can you explain that philosophy? Because we talked about this, which was the big risk, less reward. What I can't remember exactly.
Risk a lot, save a lot.
Risk a lot, save a lot. Right.
I'll give you an example. We went to Barbacoa. If you've ever been there.
Okay, so for the audience, Barbacoa is a big restaurant, two stories with a roof. So anyway, large restaurant.
It was a New Year's Eve, and it was like December 30th, so it was a couple of days before New Year's Eve, and fire comes in at 2 in the morning. Show up and there's some flame showing through the roof. Nobody's in the facility, and if you walk right inside and poke the ceiling, push up the ceiling tile, you can see that the whole attic space is involved with fire, and it's probably been burning for a while, especially since it's vented to the roof already. That is the type of structure we shouldn't send people into. We're going to do surround it around it and protect the exposure businesses, but we're not going to risk a life to save this property that's probably going to be written off and rebuilt anyways. And it was.
Yeah.
We had sent a crew in on a hand line to try it because the fire originated in the kitchen. As it turns out, there was a cleaning crew on site that had smelled the smoke, and they'd smelled it for about an hour. So that fire was burning for a while. the first battalion chief, he did a withdrawal, which our crews in the interior bring their hoses and step out. And right as the last crew stepped out, this huge HVAC unit that was on the roof went through and landed. Would have crushed that whole crew if they hadn't withdrawn in time. It's an example, like what a shame to have killed probably 3 firefighters for a building that could be rebuilt. And that I've seen throughout my career is that we don't risk people for, if it's just property. We didn't cause the fire, we didn't start the fire. We're there to protect the fire from getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back in the last century, they said a conflagration fire spreading throughout an entire city and burning, a large majority of the structures occurred every year. Every year in every major city. So Chicago, San Francisco, New York, all these cities, majority of the structures burned because they'd spread from house to house, structure to structure. That's one of our biggest jobs, to make sure that doesn't happen. A lot of the house fires we go on, if they're really big, and right now, one of the things that's working against this in building code is that the setbacks have reduced. So a fire in your neighbor's house, if it's within 10 feet, it's a good chance that your house is going to catch on fire too. Exposures or protection is something that we take very serious. Life safety first. So if we get to a house and there's a known rescue, or even if we don't know, there's cars in the driveway, but we haven't talked to the occupants. I mean, that's our priority, is to make sure that there's no one in there. And if there is, we're going to get them out. But the commercial structure, after hours, there's no cars in the parking lot, and the fire's advanced, we're not going to send people in and risk their lives.
Okay, technical questions for you then. How many people typically in a house? So if you're at your house, how many people are on that crew?
3.
Only 3?
Our standard engine company is 3. We're pushing the city to because a lot of more progressive departments have 4-person staffing on their engines.
Even 4 seems small to me. I always assume there's like 7 of you guys rolling around in a fire truck.
Mm-mm. No, our ladders and trucks have 4-person. But on any one fire, so if your house was on fire, the initial response would be 3 engines, a truck, and a battalion chief.
Oh, okay. So, okay. Interesting.
The first in engine, their responsibility is fire attack, typically. The second in engine will provide water supply. The truck will do ventilation and a primary search for victims. And then the third in engine will do exposure protection.
What's the percentage of what you do when you get called out? How much of it is it fire? How much is it accident? How much is it, whatever? What's the breakdown of what you actually do when you get called out?
Well, I think fire departments, around the time I got hired, started to see that, the fire code, the building code, was making fires occur on a less regular basis. So they moved to a model of all hazards. We got into the hazmat business, the high angle rescue, the river rescue, and then EMS has been a huge part of it. When I came on, we didn't have paramedics. We were all EMTs. What we're really good at is CPR. So you send a fire engine out when there's a heart attack. You want a fire crew doing CPR on you. I mean, that's where we shine in the EMS world. But we added paramedics, so a higher level of patient care, and so they can start lines and they can intubate and do some of the advanced procedures to stabilize patients in the field before we take them to the hospital. Still don't do transport, thankfully. So.
So my wife tells me a story that when she was single, she's living out in Eagle, fire smoke out of her house, and fire department shows up there. And she said every one of them looked like a model.
I mean, right?
Okay. All right. So here's my question for you, Jim. I assume now, obviously, what you're telling me is it used to sort of be this way, but not so much. But I would think, as a fireman, my biggest thing about why I wouldn't want to be a fireman is fire. I don't like the heat. I like the idea of getting burned. Nothing like that. Which is, maybe a little stupid or a little silly because I'll run into a house on a search warrant when somebody might be shooting at me. But I just have a thing about fire. Did you ever have that issue?
No, I mean, I've been in fire structures on fire where I was, this is a little sketchy.
Yeah.
Um,
But never a hesitation of, I'm not going, like, if you had to go into a building, it's on fire, you're not going. Because me, I'm like, it's on fire, I'm not going in. You obviously don't have that same trepidation.
no. And I've been in some really hot fires. I guess I lend a lot of credence to the training we get, and we can recognize the situations that it's too sketchy. But we're an aggressive department. We like to go in and put fires out, and it's with the risk a lot to save a lot model in place. But we do quick, rapid assessments. We're great about getting on scene. Sizing up the situation and putting a plan in place and executing it in short order because fires grow so fast.
But just know, from the standpoint of, you've never had that fear of the heat, of the fire, anything like that.
Not really. This summer we had that valley fire up there, and we've also expanded more into the wildland, and we were doing backburns, and it was the first time. It's uncomfortably hot. We were burning back to save a subdivision off of a dozer line, and we were in pretty tall grass. In my career, I'd never done a backburn. It's always been scratching line and putting water on the fire, and then BLM takes over. This is one where we're out in the hills, and we have a dozer line. We're going to burn off of it. So backburning, and the wind was shifting. It was as hot as I've ever been. I think that was probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been in a fire situation. I thought, this is kind of sketchy.
Give me a tip. Obviously, you're a captain now. Give me a typical schedule for a fireman, because I figure it's 2 days on, 15 days off. You guys are building houses on your off time. What are you doing? What's a typical schedule for maybe a brand new guy, maybe not so much? I mean, you're obviously different because you're a captain, but how is that?
When I started, we were on 1 day on, 2 days off.
Okay.
Just rotated. So we have 3 shifts, A, B, and C. And when I moved, my third year, I moved to Station 5 downtown, our busiest station. They just go out all day long. The 24-hour shift, we're up all night, and I would get exhausted, come home. I had young kids. So I get home, my wife would head to work. I would be in charge of the kids. Never got any sleep. And so my first day off always sucked. I was like a zombie. My next day, I'm getting prepared to go to work again. The schedule wasn't that great. We doubled up to 24/48 to 48/96, so 2 days on, 4 days off. And we did that in 2006. And it's been really good.
I think that's pretty standard across the U.S., kind of having those type of schedules. Why do you guys have those type of schedules as opposed to, let's just say, I don't know, 12 hours on, new team rolls in, just kind of explain that a little bit.
Well, so New York Fire, they have a day shift and a night shift. So
Okay.
they do a 9-hour day and a 15-hour. 9-hour day, 15-hour night shift. But what you see is that they have every station there has a trading partners system. So you just, hey, I'll work your 15-hour night shift, and so I'll get a 24 if you work my 9-hour day here. And so they essentially trade it together to make it a 24. I think I'm not sure exactly what the basis is, why it works out. I know, like the police schedule, where they try, and the PPD tries to staff towards when the times are busiest, and I just don't know. We'll call it tradition.
Okay, but so here's why I ask. So if you're on for 24 hours straight, I obviously realize you're getting a little bit of sleep here or there, but if you're at a busy house and you're up 24 hours, I would imagine that lends itself to you're more prone to accidents. You're more prone to make mistakes, as opposed to, 9, 12 hours in a row and then you go to bed. So that's why I ask. I was just curious about that.
Is fatigue an issue at those busier places? For sure. But what we hope is that company officers recognize when exhaustion is kicking in, and that they take care of their crews and find ways to get them the rest and relief that they need, so that they aren't making mistakes. And I think in any profession, 24 hours, think about nurses and doctors that do the same thing. And
yeah.
You don't want them to go, multiple days without sleep.
Right.
But I think everybody can. We have the physiological capability to handle a 24-hour or even a 48-hour rigorous. You're going to get some sleep during that period. But.
Yeah. Okay. Give me your idea or your sense of what the public perception is of you guys. I know cops, it's hit or miss, right? Hate, love, whatever. My take on you guys is everybody loves you. Is that the case?
It's diminished a little bit since 9/11. So one of the things that, so I was hired in 99, obviously, and then 2001 occurred at the 343 that lost their lives in the towers, was something that the appreciation of firefighters wasn't limited to just New York. And we felt it here, is that the public in general really came out of the woodwork to show their appreciation for us and what we do and what we're willing to risk. And we took advantage of that, and tried to keep that as part of our brand. I have to put credit with my union. They saw we're in a unique spot where we can rebuild our brand and prioritize the community and our image within that community and our involvement in the community to give ourselves a better chance in negotiations, and then just build that overall public appreciation for who we are and what we do.
But I'm assuming you don't show up to. Well, let me ask you this: has there ever been a situation where you showed up and somebody starts screaming at you guys and calling you a bunch of whatever losers, don't like you?
Yeah, I mean, mostly it's people who are doing illegal shit with their fires and burning things that they aren't supposed to. But that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I would think so. Is it fair to say probably 99% of all your interactions with the public is all positive, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lucky bastards. Tell me about your first fire. You remember first fire going out on?
Yeah. I was a probie, and it was a trailer house. Yeah, pretty standard. The fire, those trailer houses burn pretty quick. But there was a vehicle in the driveway, and we had to get the fire knocked down so the truck could go in and make sure there was no victims inside. It was just heart pounding and quick, and it was over quicker than I expected, but exciting. And then, you know, you want to make sure you're not whooping it up on scene and like, yes, we fucking did it, boys. No one was in the trailer, and we put the fire out.
Yeah.
And then it's like it's a lot like, you know, big victory on the football field or the baseball field, whatever. You know, that's the feeling you get when you have a great response, and the fire goes the way you expect it to, and you put it out and in short order and do a great job. And so you, as a crew, you go back and do a little celebration. It was cool. It was what I expected,
Yeah.
or what I was hoping for. It all came true.
Yeah. So you get done with the first fire and you're like, this might be the job for me.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
How often have you rolled out onto some horrific crash scene bodies, anything? Does that happen often for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, if I have any sort of PTSD, it's from the kids, you know, that have died during the course of my career. I was on at Station 12 off Highway 21, and we responded to all the big crashes on 21 from Hilltop down. There was one time when a drunk driving accident. It was just an awful scene. There was a woman and her child who were outside screaming because the husband's still in the vehicle, and I had to get into the vehicle to check out the patient. He was in the passenger seat, and on the way in I see his license on the floor, and it turned out to be a guy I went to high school with. So
Yeah, you know what, I was going to ask you that because we're in a fairly small community. I mean, we're getting bigger and bigger, but how often that happens? So you roll up, you see this guy's ID. So how's that hit you?
Yeah, it was because his wife is holding their new baby right outside the door, and she's screaming and like, "Save my husband!" And I get in, and he had snapped his neck, and he was dead. And you know, I had to tell her, and it was, you know, plus I knew the guy, his family, and that's one that always sticks with me. And some of them I just don't like to talk about.
Yeah. So how often do you actually interact with people that you've known from like high school or friends or whatever else? Does that happen a lot?
It's happened more often than I expect.
Mm.
You know, running to people I know, and you know, I've responded to houses where someone's having a massive heart attack, and it's my friend's dad, my friend's mom, grandma. You know, it's happened several times throughout the course of my career.
So Jim, how often when you go through those traumatic events, what does the fire department offer you guys as far as traumatic events?
Now they have a robust system for mental health and making sure that people are taken care of if there's something that's going to cause them some sort of PTSD afterwards. But when I first started, it was like, oh, your feelings are hurt, you know, tape an aspirin to it. That was the approach. We had department chaplains, but not a system like we have in place now with this peer support and mental health support. It's become a big part of the fire service.
Yeah, so it's got to be way better than rub some dirt on it.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about your Ladder 49 experience. We referenced backdrafts, so now we're going to reference Ladder 49. Tell me about that experience.
Well, I got onto the high angle rescue team, or we call it our tech rescue team, and we were pretty new. There was, we just completed our high angle class, so we rappel from the U.S. Bank building. That's our 20-story building downtown. We rappel and rescue up a Table Rock. We were getting to the place where we were pretty skilled in high angle rescue, you know, rescuing rock climbers, rescuing window washers. It was a really fun part of the job. They were building this Hampton Inn downtown. I think it's about 12 stories, 13 stories. They were just finishing it up, the stucco work on the very top floor, and the scaffolding failed. So this guy was on this electronic scaffolding. He was in an OSHA harness, which OSHA harnesses are meant to catch and save a person, but they're not meant to hang for very long. And this guy was getting the compartment syndrome. His legs he lost all circulation. So a quick rescue was important. Once you get past that point where, the toxins start to build up in the lower extremities, and then once you release that pressure, they have a heart attack, and because those toxins release the body. So getting there quick and getting them out of that harness was important. We got up, and our tech rescue team isn't assembled in one station, so we have to bring people together, bring the equipment, and then put the plan in place. I show up on this roof. I'm one of the newer guys, and one of the bigger guys. I wasn't the logical candidate to go over the roof, over the edge. But we had the guy that should have gone. He just had a vasectomy, and he couldn't get in a harness. The other guy hadn't been through the rope rescue class yet, and we had another guy who was trained up. His nickname was Sundial, because he could use a sundial to time his movement. So they said, I guess it's you, Walker. So I went over, and I got this huge melon. Remember guys telling me, like, it was like an eclipse when your head came over the edge. But there was this big the top of the building has a feature that where you have to swing down to get to the wall. So I came over and I put my foot right through the new stucco, and my footprint is still on the side of the building up there. CNN picked up the feed live. So on top of US Bank, they have a weather camera or something, but they were able to take the feed. So they trained that camera right down on the Hampton Inn, and CNN picked it up live. Our admin was receiving calls from around the world of people giving us advice on how to do it better.
Wait a minute, did you see the footage from CNN?
I never did, but a friend of mine called me and said, I saw you on CNN. What?
Okay, I wonder if I can locate that. If I can, I'm going to locate it and embed it in for the audience to kind of see if maybe you guys in the audience have recommendations for how he could have done it better as well. So I'm assuming you got him down successfully.
Yeah, picked him off and lowered him, and but I was on the front page of all the newspapers. It was a pretty cool event. Whoa. So,
well, okay. At some point during your career, you've got into a little bit of positions, I guess union positions. It would be the best way to explain it, where you're negotiating with the city. Tell me about how that is. How does that politically dynamics work with negotiating with the city or the mayor here in Boise?
I think a lot of it has to, what sparked my interest in joining the union and becoming part of our union leadership was when I came in. I talked about how we lost the airport fire station, and we had a mayor and a city council that didn't like the fire department, really didn't like the fire union, and we didn't have a contract when I came in.
But why wouldn't they like the fire? Why wouldn't they like them? Again, getting back to public perception, I always envision you guys can have whatever you want, but that's not the case. Why not?
There was first at the time we were underpaid by comparison to other cities of our size and even to our peers throughout the state, and we were behind quite a ways so that we were looking for a better wage package,
Mm-hmm.
and they had other priorities. They, public safety wasn't their number one. The mayor at the time had squandered, and the city council, I think that their budgeting process wasn't open and honest, and they just had different priorities than public safety. So the police union was at odds with them as well. It sparked my interest because we were, I watched what our mayor and council were doing, and in my view, cities have a few critical core missions, and one is number one should be public safety.
Yeah.
A really strong police and fire department. Next, make the shit roll downhill. So there's a sewer system and parks are nice to have, not a must have. Everything else, beyond public safety and utilities are nice to haves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have great parks, and
Yeah.
glad the city's invested in all that. It makes it a real worthy place to live.
Yeah.
But when budgets get tight, those are the things that should be cut first, not public safety.
Right.
And that mayor and council believed otherwise.
How, at some point, because the police union was having the same issue that you kind of joined forces with them?
Yeah. Well, city council and the mayor did change out and it was, both of our unions got behind candidates that were more public safety friendly.
Mm-hmm.
That was their budget priority, and we helped get them elected. So we had changed it out. The one issue was there were, with our health insurance, the city was self-insured for health insurance. So they'd pay every claim up to a certain amount, and then reinsurance would kick in. But for the most part, the city was paying 100% of our health insurance, except for those bigger claims. And they were doing this quite successfully, but they were building this balance every year, and it was on the backs of police and fire, because our low utilization, our members are young, healthy, don't need a lot of health care. The general employees were eating up the majority of what was in their trust fund every year. They're budgeting, but they were banking money, and their trust was growing, but they were starting to cry wolf. We could see that this is unsustainable, so we're going to go to a new model. And at the time, that was one benefit that police and fire both loved. I was on the City Health Trust, and my counterpart from the police union, Brian Lee, was on the City's Health Trust. But everybody else in the trust was from management. And they were, every time we'd get an appeal or try and enhance benefits, they'd look at it and they'd make a decision based off of budget only, not on what's best for the people that have to utilize that health insurance. So I went out and looked for an alternative, seeing that this change was coming and they were going to force us into this new cafeteria plan. And I found I put together this team of consultants and advisors that helped us separate. But one of the things they said is, you don't have enough people in the fire department to have your own self-funded trust. You're going to have to team up with the police union. And I love the boys in blue, but we haven't always worked well together.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How is the relationship?
In Boise, it's really good.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes their union leadership has been out there, they pursuing things that are outside of our interests, but for the most part, we've been on the same page. And at this time, we happened to be on the same page. We had a common need, and we teamed up. And Brian Lee and I spent 2 years putting this plan together, meeting with city councilors, working the system so that they would approve the separation, because it was a big leap for the city to say, here, police and fire take over your health care.
Yeah.
In fact, we had an HR director who warned the city council, if you give police and fire control of their health insurance, they'll give themselves unlimited massages and all these rich benefits. They'll spend it down to nothing, and then they'll come back on bended knee begging to get back into our system. And there was a lot of counselors, there was a couple counselors who took that to heart. But we had Vern Bistefeld, who's one of my favorite ex-cops in Boise. Do you know Vern?
No.
There's public safety buildings named after him. He was a lifelong Boise police guy, Ada County commissioner. I mean, he was just a community guy through and through. There's a lot of good stories about Vern. He was just the type of public servant that I wanted to be. Loved the guy. But he was also not PC. He was old school. And I loved it because we couldn't meet with the whole city council. Brian and I would have to give presentations to 2 counselors at a time, so they didn't have a quorum. And it was Vern and one of the other city councilors, one of the female city councilors. And Vern was 100% behind our push for this plan. Best quote I've ever had from a city councilor. We gave our presentation, and the female city councilor said, I don't get it. Why are you guys more special than the general employees? And Vern looked at her and said, so-and-so, if you're in the park and you're getting raped, you're not going to call the mayor's secretary, are you? She was shocked. It was
But it makes
beautiful.
sense.
It quieted her down. She's like, yeah, you're right. And then I think the vote for that was unanimous.
Wow.
A lot of time and effort, and Brian and I became healthcare experts, much to our chagrin. And I've been doing it now for 13 years as a trustee, but if you ask anybody, our health insurance is second to none. It's a successful program, and we are pushing both of our populations towards wellness. There wasn't a focus on that before, and now we're setting up our benefits so that our guys. The goal when we started was cradle to grave type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to make sure that our guys were retiring and living long, putting as much hurt on the Percy pension plan as possible. It was not uncommon for guys to walk out of either profession, get into retirement, and then big heart attack, the cancer, because there was no focus on wellness. We're hoping that with the benefits we push now, and that guys are getting tested and they know that they have issues, and we've had clinical saves for heart issues and cancers that we wouldn't have had if we were still in the city's old system.
So I haven't asked any Boise PD guys this, but I'm going to ask you, since you're on the Boise Fire Department side. What are your year to year, or do you have any tests for your fitness? Do you have that? And with what you're saying now, we're really striving to make sure our fire department guys are always in the best shape. Are there incentives for going out and working out and keeping in shape? How do you handle it?
Yeah, so one of the things that Brian and I pushed for on the city's health trust was to get an annual physical, a comprehensive physical, because both of our jobs involve adrenaline dumps and heart, a lot of instant kickstart of the heart. So your heart's going 100 miles a minute, whether it be responding to a shooting or to a house fire. Both of our populations are susceptible to heart issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it made sense for us to offer an annual physical that did cardiac stress testing, was fully comprehensive. We asked the city to pay for that because at the time it only paid for a general wellness visit per year. No, why would we spend extra money on you guys? Why can't the general employees get the same thing? Our populations are different. Our needs are different. Our guys are walking out the door in retirement and living for 5 years and then dying dead of a heart attack or some unknown cancer. And we wanted to have better screening. And so, yes, we offer annual physicals that are comprehensive with cardiac stress tests, full labs, and we have a pretty strenuous. So we have weight rooms and treadmills, and I mean, every one of our stations has.
Oh, I'm sure you guys are like barbecues and the weight rooms, and you guys have it all. But you have like an annual test to say, hey, you have to maintain this certain physical fitness standard as a fireman.
Not yet. I mean, we've pushed for it,
Okay.
With some resistance, and on both sides, there's still a little bit of lack of faith in how the powers that be would use that information. That our intention is to drive people towards wellness and not to find a way to fire people. But we still have to. We're working towards it. We just don't have something that both sides can trust.
Well, do you? Okay, so you mentioned something here. So do you ever have a guy? Does this ever come into play where you go, that dude is now 40 pounds overweight? Do you have a mechanism of how to deal with a fireman who's become out of shape?
Yeah, I mean, and that's within the purview of management. There have been folks who they don't have the physical wherewithal to do the job anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to take them off the line and put them through a program to try and get them back in that sort of shape. Now, the benchmarks, we don't have established benchmarks that they need to hit before they come back.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the programs are pretty loose. We just want you to be in better shape with no standard at the end that they have to meet. We're working towards those.
Because you know, obviously you and I have spoken about police officers and firemen always needing to be in shape, but can you kind of talk about kind of your own situation where you broke your heels and you tore your pec muscles, and you know what that took to get back in shape? Because obviously the more in shape you are, your body's going to heal itself quicker. But can you talk about those two injuries?
Yeah. Well, first of all, culture has changed with both the Boise Police and the Boise Fire.
Mm-hmm.
It's a healthier culture.
Mm-hmm.
More, there's the peer pressure to work out and stay in shape so that I can count on you when I need you. And I think that is true of both of our organizations, which is different from when I first came on, where there were, guys were out of shape, but he's never going to be called upon for anything important. So just let him go.
Yeah. But
now we test at the entry to make sure that they're ready for a lifetime of fitness. Because it can be, the closest I've had to a mental breakdown of any sort is I tore my pec. It was a 9-month recovery. The surgery was invasive. I wasn't allowed to lift heavy for 9 full months. And my pec was still vulnerable to re-injuring. That 9 months off where I was doing light duty jobs, so not hanging out with my crew and not doing my normal job and wondering if I'm ever going to get back to it. If I had, I'm always a happy guy, so I don't think I've ever had depression, but I was probably close then. But I came back for a couple months. It was horrible for my physical condition. Started putting on weight. Came back. I then did an off-duty injury. I made a cliff jump that I shouldn't have. Have I told you the story?
No. So
I got invited on this raft trip on the Middle Fork of the Salmon with a group that I had one friend. He's like, I need some help oaring these boats. I'm like, okay. I love to raft the Middle Fork. And we flew into Indian Creek, floated down to Marble Creek, which is one of my favorite camps on the Middle Fork. It's a big, beautiful pool, and it's got this cliff you can jump off. And I was with this old boy all day. People always say, "How much did you have to drink?" I'd only had like 1 or 2 beers that day. It was super hot out. We pull up to the beach at camp. I just got to cool off. And I jumped off this rock before, so I ran up. I started my jump a little too soon, didn't clear the ledge at the bottom, and bounced off and broke both my heels. I didn't know I'd broken them. I rafted the rest of the way out, but I couldn't walk hardly at all. And my friends had to do all the work for me. I just stayed because I could still oar, and they needed somebody who could oar through all the big rapids. But then I was off for another 3 months, and I just got fatter and had more drinking days. The cool thing about the 4896 is that I really have only two really good drinking days, and then I have to be sober and then go back to work. Not that I get drunk it all the time, but I just had my whiskey
Yeah.
a night or so.
Yeah.
Well, now I had whiskey every night of the week, not just a couple nights. Whiskey, and then you start eating like shit. And once again, I'm not around my guys. I'm not around that culture that says, "Get in shape, work out, you fat ass." So I got into the start of this year, and I was working. I had my side hustle that I was still doing,
Mm-hmm.
which worked for that local startup Black Sage, and was doing international sales. So all my vacation time and trades were dedicated towards these. About every 2 months, I would travel, visit a client out in Sweden, the Middle East, UAE, Oman, Taiwan. We developed a drone defense system. It started out with a software company that built this command and control that brought together these disparate sensors for the purpose of detecting drones. So radars and passive sensors and long-range thermal imaging cameras, and then a certain type of effector, whether it be a signal jammer or something that was kinetic. Most of my clients were commercial, so police forces and presidential guards, those sorts of things. Taiwanese military and UAE. I worked with the military there, Dubai police.
That sounds like a good side hustle right there.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Interesting.
It seems like there'd be a huge upside to that, especially what's going on with like Ukraine and all the drones. And I mean, they just seem to be using drones like crazy in that war.
Yeah. Yeah. So it started out, the big concern was like ISR type of missions where you don't want drones hovering over a presidential palace and learning the routines of the supreme leader. In Europe, like the Swedish police used it for event protection. I was over there for a couple of EU events where all the EU leaders were there, and they, same sort of thing. They were looking out for drones that were hovering for ISR type of purposes, and not necessarily drop payloads, but our systems could also help determine if there was a payload, a bomb to drop or something like that. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, I got to work with military and police and same type of guys. I mean, police, and it's, we all have a similar sort of personality, police, fire, and military. And it's just fun working with those type of guys from different nationalities, because they've got the same, no matter what religion they are or ethnic background, there's always something that ties us together.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun working with those folks from those countries.
I got two random questions before I start talking to you about leadership. I see videos every once in a while of fire departments or somebody trying to put out a fire. Somehow the hose has gotten crazy. Okay, they've lost control. Why not? I think I know the answer to this. Why not just run out and grab it? Why are you crawling on top of the hose until you get to the end of it?
So the main reason is so you don't get whipped by that So the nozzle,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, if that happens and there's someone proximal to that nozzle,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would knock them out, crush their head.
Okay.
I'll give you a quick story.
Okay. Yeah.
I got hired a few months before my academy, and they put me on hose testing, which was an awful assignment. This captain and I, this long-term captain and I, were walking down. You pressurize the hoses and keep them at the test pressure for a certain amount of time, and if they hold the pressure, they pass. These were pressurized, and we didn't have safety protocols. We're just testing the pressure and saying yay or nay to the hose. We're walking up the hose, and suddenly I'm laying on the ground. I've got road rash, and I'm covered with water because this hose had broke, whipped, taken out our legs. Because I'm an athlete, I landed on my side. But the guy I was walking next to landed on his head.
Oh.
And he was very close to death. He was in a coma for a long time. He finally made it back to the line, but it was a year-long process for him to rehab and get back.
Wow.
So the pressure that those lines hold is significant, and a traumatic failure just, well, it's if there's someone close to the hose, it's not going to be good.
Mm. Okay. Guns and hoses, is that still going on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you play hockey at all?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll ask you this anyway. So Guns and Hoses, annual event between the law enforcement, fire department. How badly do you guys want to beat the police officers? Do you ever stack your team with ringers?
Yeah, the desire to win is next to nothing. Like, we don't want to be second place to the cops ever. So it's not a position we find ourselves in very often. So
Where does it, you guys? That's like a charity event, right?
yeah.
Where does the money go?
For that one, it's split between police and fire charities.
Okay.
So we have our burnout fund, and which provides immediate funds for victims of house fires,
Okay.
hotel stays, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
I don't know where the police charity, which one they support, but they always have good causes too.
Yeah.
We do stack the team, and we have. So we've hired 2. I think we're getting our 3rd former steelhead on the fire department.
Bastards. Okay, so Jim, at some point you decide, and I'm assuming you could just remain a line fireman throughout your career. But at some point you decide to start promoting, and you're a captain now. Why did you decide to do that?
I guess, I mean, first, it's the natural progression. You want to move up through your career. You don't want to be stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like if you stay in one house in the same position, you're going to be stagnated. You're not going to expose yourself to new things and new techniques. And so change throughout my career has been a theme.
Mm-hmm.
Moving up, going to busier houses, taking on new skills, the tech rescue, the hazmat. And so for me personally, professional satisfaction comes from improving myself and obtaining those leadership type of positions. I think once I got into union leadership, and I could foresee a lot of the experienced and better captains that were part of the department, the guys that people looked to were going to be retiring soon, and felt it was necessary to replace and move into those positions. And for me, one of my greatest areas of satisfaction is helping to develop people throughout their career. So I've had, I didn't know that was something I get a lot of satisfaction of, because it was self-centered at first, improving myself. But once I got into a position of leadership, a company officer, developed my crews, became one of my most important roles, creating the next company officers for the next generation. And I've had now 5 of my senior firefighters that are promoted to captain. It's a process. You have to start them out with the basics and then move into more complicated and more of the one-off type of situation, so that they're able to respond to any emergency and tackle it effectively. But I take a lot of pride in that. That's one of the things that I'm most proud of, is the people I've developed to move up in their career.
Do you think leadership is innate or learned, and where did you get your leadership skills from?
I think some of it can be learned, but for the most part, I believe it's innate. You know, those from throughout sports and throughout every area of my life, those people that you just gravitate to, that I'd follow that guy into running building. There's people like that you know are going to be the best, the strongest leaders, the ones that have throughout their life been on the forefront of whatever they're doing, or trying to take charge in situations. One of the things that tests people, company officer role on firefighting, is if you're able to come to a scene, make decisions quickly, but not get stuck in a rut. Like, this was the strategy I put in place. These are the tactics I chose, to not be able to bend when the situation changes. What we saw on Arrival is now different, and to be able to adjust, pivot, and still tackle an emergency. You know, there's certain qualities you recognize, like, this guy's gonna be okay. You know, we can teach him the basics, and they can learn all the rules of all of our EOGs, our SOGs, SOPs, whatever they call them in whatever profession. But you know, those give good guidance, and you can be an effective captain, company officer, incident commander. But are you going to be the guy that people want to work for, or the guy or the gal now? And I think you recognize it when in our department, for instance, when someone moves on from a station, are they getting the next highest senior person, or are they getting the bottom of the barrel, the person who's forced to go there? And you see a lot of people who don't have that innate leadership that get the person who's forced to go work with them. You can teach them all the strategies, all the tactics, all the SOPs, but there's that X factor, I think, that some of us have, that was it passed on to us from our parents. I mean, quite likely, I know that a lot of what my brother and I both, the qualities we have that I think make us good leaders, was given to us, passed on to us at an early age from our parents.
Okay. All right, weird topic for you before I get to the last question for you. But in all your off time that you have as a fireman, and for the audience, if Jim is able to somehow finagle some pictures for me in between his 15 days off here, we're going to put him in here. But why did you decide? So Jim lives in a house that, I don't know, 2-story, 3-story, and it wasn't built. It was actually an old house that you actually moved. Not you moved, but it was put up. A truck moves it down several blocks. I don't even know how far it was.
1 block.
One block. But it's a monster house. Why do that?
Well, we lived, my wife and I lived in an old house over behind the federal building in Boise. And I was always on the search. I call him Joe the North Ender. At some point remodeled the house and just put in what he thought was appropriate. And I was trying to restore it to its original point. This was in the 70s. He put all this weird rock and weird molding, and I had pulled it all out, but now I was on the search for new moldings.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I go by a house that looked like it was going to be torn down, I'd pop in and see if it had moldings that matched the profile of the house I was remodeling that we currently lived in. And I went. This house had a sign out front said, "Free, must be moved." Oh, they're going to tear that place down. I mean, there's no way someone's going to move that house. So I went up on the porch and like, holy shit, this thing has all original woodwork. It's really nice. I went home and told my wife, I'm like, you should see this place. I'm going to go get all the molding in that place.
I got plenty of time.
I took her over to the house and she goes, I want it. I'm like, the molding? She goes, no, I want the house. I'm like, no, wait, I didn't say we were going to take the house. I go, you way overestimate my skill, because I framed one of the jobs I had growing up. I worked for a builder, and so I did enough to be dangerous. I knew enough about framing and everything. I could roof a house, and then in college I did some framing in the summers. So I knew I was skilled. I could work with a lot of things, but I wasn't, an expert in any area. But she started driving it. She made some calls, and she's like, we can get the house. There's no one else who wants it. I'm like, of course there's no one else who wants it, because no one's dumb enough. But at the same time, she had found a block away. She goes, we can move it right there. It'll be easy. Okay. So she started getting me into it. And then when we looked at it, I'm like, we could really turn this. We got original pictures of the house, and it was incredible. Like, I think I can do it. So we made the leap, and then for 2 years of my life, every day off, I was there remodeling it and working on it.
They give you the house for free?
Mm-hmm.
How much does it cost to actually move the house a block using that?
Well, because it's all stone on the first floor.
Yeah.
It weighed a lot more. The prep work took a lot more, because it came over with all the stones still attached.
Yeah.
That was $80,000. And then we had to go underneath a fiber optic line.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tall house, 2-story, almost 2.5-story. But this fiber optic line they had to release it from the poles for like a half mile in each direction, get enough stretch to get the house under. That was $5,000 alone. And then going under the Idaho power lines, and probably another 15. It was $100,000 just to get it on site. So free. And then I got in the bidding war on the lot. It was that built up to,
of course you did,
06. It was over 2005, and there was this realtor who recognized the value of that place downtown as 2 lots in the heart of downtown. Yeah. And so I had made a killing on my other house. I ended up selling it, but every dime I made in it went to buying that lot. And then I had to spend 2 years I had to hire a professional, fire guys. Go figure. We had an electrician.
Yeah, what a surprise. What a surprise.
Plumber, we have all the trades on the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you still have to pay them, but they give you the bro deal.
Yeah. So audience, hopefully Jim will give me some pictures, because it was a very impressive feat to see this house move. It was very, very impressive. So, okay, 2 last questions. I'm going to ask you a little bit different question that I normally ask the fire department or the police guys, because I think it's going to be a little bit different, because you and I have known each other for a long time. You are a pretty happy guy most of the time, just about every time that I've ever spoken to you. So you're always in a pretty good mood. Do you think being a fireman, did it affect your family? I mean, let's just say, I can't imagine that you're having the same stress per se that police officers have. Maybe you are, and maybe you could talk about that. But how about the hours? Is it affecting your family as your kids got older? Did
Did it take a toll?
I missed a lot of important milestone birthdays and events that you just can't get your time off for those events. And that had some impact. But on the flip side, that my kids were always proud of that, me being in that profession. They still are. They love telling their friends, "Hey, my dad's a firefighter. What's your dad do?" "Oh, he's a lawyer." "Oh, cool." Am I ever going to make as much money as my brother, my sister? Probably not, but
Yeah.
It's just for quality life. The friends I've made, all of my closest friends are firefighters, and I wouldn't change a thing. I think my family's proud. My mother-in-law still maybe not. So
Well, that was going to be my last question for you. Do your in-laws still hate you?
We've come to an understanding, and we're different people.
Yeah.
And we'll never be we'll never be super tight, but
Yeah.
I know that they appreciate that I've always been able to provide for my family, and they've been more interested in some of the things I've done with side hustles, and I've just always had something on the days off, whether it be the house, the union, the black sage. I've just never been the guy who came home and then worked out for 4 days straight.
Yeah.
And they appreciate that about me, for sure.
How long did it take Monica, your wife, to settle into Idaho?
Oh, a couple years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, she'd lived in big cities her whole life.
Yeah. Big change.
Yeah. But when we first got here, I took her on her first drive around Idaho, and we were up just above Boise, and there was a car pulled over, and a guy just camping there. She goes, "What's he doing?" Like, "He's camping. Like, he can do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, he can." It's nothing like the East Coast. And there's things I appreciate about the East Coast, but I love Idaho, and it would never change. And you asked me about the boys in blue, and I have some really close friends from my union relationships, but they go beyond that. Helping some of my buddies who are on, long-term friends from the police department whose kids see the light and want to be firefighters.
Oh, that's funny.
I've helped some of their sons get hired, and if they're good guys, there's some guys that never help, but it's always been a fun rivalry. And I have a couple really good friends on the police department that we came in together, and we're gonna be retiring around the same time, and I look forward to spending more time with them and doing things off duty and putting this whole thing behind us.
Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate the interview.
Yeah, thanks for having me.